Welcome to Power Hour, where the editors of Powersports Business interview the movers and shakers of the powersports industry. Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan Baker with Powersports Business. We're here today with Fran O'Hagan from Pied Piper. He's the president and CEO. Welcome, Fran.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, so Fran, tell me a little bit about your background, how you got into. So Pied Piper does a lot of surveys, data, studies, dealerships, right? All kinds of dealers, not just power sports dealerships. I know you do automotive. Do you do marine as well, or
We do.
you do all those?
And RVs,
Ag, RV.
you name it.
Oh,
If it has an
any
engine,
kind of dealership.
that's it.
You probably see a lot of common threads though in these dealerships.
We do. There's some things that are similar, and you figure the customers a lot of times will buy products from these different industries. So the customers are sometimes similar, but there also are ways that the industries are very different.
Right. Well, and I think everybody, pretty much everybody in the US has had an experience with a car dealership, and we all kind of know those car dealership models, and a lot of them are negative stereotypes of things. You think of the old used car dealer guy, the wheeler dealer type, and all that. But a lot of that stuff has changed too over the years, and a lot of what car dealers have done as far as like data and following the data and doing things that with their internet, with response times and how they deal with customers in the sales funnel, is they've kind of been ahead of that game, for a lot of it. And a lot of us in the recreational industries have followed, but it's taken a little longer, right?
That's absolutely the case. So, Brendan, you asked about my background, and as far as it relates to power sports, I would say it goes back to being a 17-year-old and deciding that I wanted a motorcycle, and I'd never ridden. I noticed back then, this is in the early 80s, that as a teenager with some money in my pocket, trying to buy a motorcycle, I still had to go and try to arm wrestle the parts guy to get a brochure. Nobody was really interested in actually
They didn't
selling
want to
me
talk to you.
anything. So I ended up buying a bike. I got a GPZ 550. That was my very first motorcycle.
Oh, wow. So
And since then,
you're an on-road street rider.
I was.
Okay.
Although since then I started riding in the dirt too. But since then I've been a very, very good retail motorcycle customer. I've probably bought 100 different motorcycles in my life.
Nice.
And if it has
Good
two wheels, yeah, exactly. If it has two wheels and an engine, I'm a fan, regardless of whether it's a cruiser or a sport bike or a dirt bike.
Yeah.
And I happen to live 15 minutes from Laguna Seca, so I try to get over to Laguna Seca pretty
Awesome
often.
track. I've been there, raced there. Yeah, I love that. Oh yeah, 15. So you've done that 17 mile. You're not one of those guys that lives on 17-mile drive there. No.
I'm not. I live in a little tiny community of, families and second homes that's not too far away from there. All of that started before I had anything to do with the auto industry. And the auto industry is actually where I began working. I worked for vehicle manufacturers, Mercedes, BMW, Land Rover. And the part of that business that I really loved was helping the dealer networks perform better. In other words, how do we get the dealers to sell more stuff more profitably to more loyal customers? And I enjoyed that part of the business. And in 2003, I decided to start a company where I could do that, not for one manufacturer, but for everybody, and not for one industry, but multiple industries. So that was about 20 years ago. And since then, our niche has been measuring factually what are the behaviors, whether it's in person or online or telephone, what are the specific behaviors where dealers who do this end up selling more or making more money or having more loyal customers. So we're not particularly interested in what you think is important or what I think is important or what a dealer thinks is important. We're interested in what the math says is important.
Data. Yeah,
That's
you got to
it.
follow the science and the
That's
data.
it.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way because it takes out all that, subjective stuff that, everyone's like, well, but they're Harley, they're cool,
It
or whatever.
does. Now,
So
to be fair, if you think about power sports dealers, not every power sports dealer follows every best practice.
right.
Here at O'Hagan Motors, this is how we do it. And it's my dealership, and I like to do it this way. And doggone it, that's how we're going to do it. And we completely respect that. And the other point I should make is that there's a lot of variability throughout the country. What will work really well selling motorcycles on Long Island would be very different in Los Angeles or very different in Des Moines.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I can imagine.
but a lot of the things that we measure, they're not controversial. People pretty much agree. And the part of the business that you and I are talking about today, responding to web leads, responding to
Yeah.
customers who contact through the website.
So your lead effectiveness study, right? Is
That's
that what you
it.
call? Yeah, internet
That's
lead effectiveness, and which the internet's become. I mean, let's face it, your website is kind of your front door now, right?
It is. Everybody needs to think of it as this is the way we meet the customer. It's not that you need to sell them something within the next 5 minutes,
No,
but you're meeting this customer for the first time. Just the same way if somebody walked through the door, you probably would try to get to know them a little bit. You wouldn't just jump down their throat and say, "Are you ready to buy today?"
right.
So yeah, the first
Maybe in
contact.
Long Island, I don't know. Maybe in New York.
No, yeah, you're right
No,
there.
but even some of the aggressiveness. I mean, I saw something, and maybe it was in your there. There was a study showing how that aggressive sales tactic isn't even, that they've measured that, and that's not working, and that doesn't work anymore in today's environment, not really.
Things have just changed completely. Like those of us who have been watching power sports for the past 20 years, it has completely transformed. And I would say that the younger generation, so if you're 25 or you're 30 today, you just assume that, hey, it's always been like this. But
Right.
no, it wasn't like this. Things are very different. And it all comes down to smartphones. When
Right.
the
Yeah.
smartphone came out in 2007,
Yeah.
everything changed. It wasn't websites, it wasn't the internet. It was us humans walking around holding in our hand this device that would let us get information immediately about whatever it is that we're interested in shopping for or interested in buying. That's what's completely changed it.
Yeah. It's walking around with your computer in your hand, and so many different things. So yeah, you don't have magazines. You're not even carrying around magazines and books anymore half the time.
Sure. Sure.
So yeah, I think, yeah, you're spot on with that. And that, I feel like the smartphone, it's revolutionized a lot of industries, and even the automotive industry has dealt, but they might have been on it early. I don't know. I think just because of the size of their
No,
dealer networks, it's just a
they
different animal.
they were awful also. It's just that
Yeah,
they were awful 15 years ago. So
right.
when Pied Piper first measured web response for the auto industry, 2008, 40% of the time, the customers in 2008 got nothing. They'd contact a dealer, nothing, crickets. And
Yeah,
of course, that's completely changed for the car guys. They figured it out. For power sports, 2018 was the time when there was no manufacturer paying any attention to what the dealers were doing when customers would contact them on the website. 2018, that's not that long ago.
no,
But
no,
2019, that started to change. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it completely changed things again. And
right.
even dealers who might not have been all that interested in what was going on with the website, well, all of a sudden they were forced to pay attention
Oh
to it.
yeah, you kind of, because yeah, you were forced into using your website as your commerce site. You didn't really have people coming in. It was like appointment only kind of stuff. And
Sure.
I remember visiting a dealer around here, and he was like, he had just let a lot of his staff go. You know, they weren't laying anyone off yet, but he basically sent them home and said, we're going to figure this out, whatever. And then he was bombarded with like, you know, like a week later with interest calls and
Sure.
internet leads and all this stuff. And he's writing it all down by hand and trying to make all these deals,
Sure.
you know. So I think that you're right that really forced the hand of this industry, people in the industry, like, hey, this is a viable way to make, you know, to make a sale and to make money. Yeah, you're still having people come in and pick it up and
Sure.
buy, you know, people are still buying from the showroom, but really that first interaction and what your inventory is, your showroom, everything has to be out there.
So right.
So but yeah, let's go over this study. I'm going to share my screen here. I've got your study pulled up on our website, and I'm going to just share this so we can talk about it real quick here. Let me make sure I get. Okay, cool. So yeah, well, Indian, obviously they've done pretty well, but if you drill down into it, you know, first off, how does this study work? How does you've got you know, it says 3,718 dealerships. Are you calling all of those yourself, or you've got people that, how do you do that? Mystery shoppers and things?
Sure. So for measuring web response, we do all of that in-house. That's all our people in Monterey, California, sitting in front of computers,
Yeah.
acting exactly like a customer. So we give a new name, a new email address, a new local telephone number, and we look at the inventory, we ask a question about a unit that's in inventory. And then over the next 24 hours, we measure how quickly does the dealership respond by email, by text? Do they call the phone number that we left them? And also, what's the quality of that response? And the score for internet lead effectiveness, super simple, easy to understand. It's a 0 to 100. It means just the same thing. If you have kids and your kids come home and they have a test and they get a 70 or an 80 or a 40, it means exactly the same thing, which is
Oh,
to say, when you see scores of 50s or 40s, you understand what that means through the eyes of the customer.
that's
It
not good.
means no, it means that a lot of times in the power sports industry, it's three customers in 10 get no personal response at all. They might get an auto response, but three customers in 10 get no personal response today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you know, my unofficial tests, because I've done a few, like reach out to dealers through their website. I do that from time to time just to, hey, see if they want a story idea or whatever. But I do reach out to people and I get very, very little response, you know.
Sure. Now,
And
very important point. It's not malicious.
no,
And it's not as if dealers don't know how to run their business. If you think about typical power sports dealers, dealer principals, or general managers, they're brilliant entrepreneurs. They do a really good job with their business. It's a hard type of business to run. You don't have an enormous profitability and scale like the car guys do. But what I would tell you is the web customers, they're not the squeaky wheel, they're invisible. And if you
yeah,
think about the way, if I'm a general manager, you think about my day starts with the greatest intentions. I show up for work, I have an idea of things I'm going to do, and then the day takes over and my
right.
hair's on fire. At
Yeah,
retail, that's just the way it works.
right.
So, really, if you think about it, subconsciously during the day, I'm making a decision, what am I going to let drop off the table? Because I have these crises to take care of.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, when the web customers are not the squeaky wheel, they can be dropped off the edge of the table if you're not careful. There's something that we offer as advice to power sports dealers, and that is we say, don't go home at the end of the day with a digital customer, a website customer locked up in your store any more than you would go home at the end of the day if you had a physical customer still wandering around the store. You need to
Right.
respond to everybody once a day, religiously.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if I'm the GM of the store, there is always going to be somebody responsible for locking the door. Whether it's me or whether it's another manager, somebody goes on vacation, there's still somebody that's going to turn out the lights and lock the door. It
Right.
needs to be the same with the web customers too. Has to always be somebody taking care of them before you go home at the end of the
So
day.
you have to look at your queue. Years ago, when I was a teenager and early 20 something working for my dad's parts store before the internet and everything, we had, two or three, like the phones would stack up, but then
Sure.
customers were coming in. It's kind of like you said, who do you take care of first?
That's it.
Well, a lot of times you're like, well, you try to do it in order, but then some stuff just goes out of whack.
Sure.
And there were many times when you're like, oh God, who's on that line? That guy's been there for a long, long time.
Right.
And you're like, you pick it up. Hello, you're still there. And they're like, yeah, I've been waiting here for like half hour. you
Right.
know? And,
Right.
it's like one of those things where, yeah, you have to manage all of that stuff. Now, some of it I think can be managed a little bit through automated responses, which are just kind of, can be tailored a little bit. And with AI coming, I don't understand AI. I hope I don't ever really have to, but from what I hear, AI is coming and will be able to tailor some of these messages a little bit. But, eventually you're going to get to a real people,
Right.
talking.
Well said. Well said. And it's interesting because within the power sports industry, I would say about one dealer in five, it's pretty many. I mean, it's
Yeah,
20% or so. They do a brilliant job with this part of the business today. So it's not like nobody does a good job.
right.
Um, but there are three dealers who are doing not as good a job for everyone that is doing this brilliant job. And it depends on the brands too. One of the things that we've learned is if there's some conscience, let's call it, some reminder to pay attention to this part of the business. In the auto industry, we provide one ILE report, measurement and report per week to the car
Oh,
dealers typically. So the car dealers think of it as, a customer reaching out and tapping a salesperson on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, I'm interested in this," and seeing
yeah.
what the customer experience is. And what the car guys learned is many of the car dealers have a dashboard that will say, "Hey, this is how many leads we got in, this is how many we responded to." But what the car guys learned pretty quickly was that they would get really good at pretending to respond. And the
Oh, yeah.
dashboard would say, "Oh yeah, Brendan Baker, yeah, we responded to him." No, you
Yeah.
didn't.
No, not
Yeah,
really. Yeah. Okay. So
that was fake.
it's like the fake response. Like, yeah, I think we handle. Oh, well, and now with a lot of these plugins that you can do, like pre-qualifications without
Sure.
credit pull, all that stuff is interesting because that adds another dashboard. I've seen some dashboards where it's like, hey, you've got X amount of guys in here that have filled out your pre-qual, and they're it kind of pulls up their credit score,
Sure.
without doing a hard pull, and you can see like, hey, this is a good one, a good lead. Oh, this guy's got a pretty low score. We'll still talk to him or whatever, but financing could be difficult.
Right. The
um
most the most successful dealerships, they don't let their employees discriminate, let's call it.
right.
There's a process. They follow the same process for everybody that comes through. Yeah, because you can't really be sure. You can say, "Oh
Yeah,
yeah, we have all these factors that say that Brendan is a good prospect," but you may have this guy over here you've never heard from who is, an hour away from pulling the trigger at another dealership.
and he may have a lot of cash, or whatever,
Exactly.
so yeah, you don't know. You're
No.
absolutely right, you don't know. And you have to follow. That's probably, I think, the more process driven we are instead of like
That's
going,
it.
that guy's not, yeah.
That's it.
And
It's
so,
if you visit somebody that runs a successful car dealership and you say to them, "Hey, are processes important here at your dealership?" They'll look at you like you're an alien. What are you, an idiot? My
yeah,
whole business, every aspect
that's
of it is processes.
right.
And if you think about it, that works fine for smaller businesses too. If you think about Starbucks,
Uh-huh.
a barista doesn't have to have any tribal knowledge about how to make a cappuccino. They're taught that in half an hour when they sign up for work.
True.
And that model may actually be a better model for power sports than for them to try to copy the car business. Because the
Okay.
car, you think about it, a power sports dealership kind of looks like a car dealership. There's a sales department, a parts department, service. But if you actually look at the scale, most of the power sports dealerships are very, very different from a car dealership.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
maybe
it's a sport. I always look at
sure,
we're recreational as a sport, it has a different, you're not doing the volume and all that. Plus, a lot of people want a lot of hand holding.
they
Sometimes I've
do.
had, yeah,
They do. It's fun. If I'm
yeah,
buying my third Honda Accord, that's pretty much a transaction. But if I've worked up my nerve to fork over 25,000 for a Ducati or a
yeah,
Harley or a dirt bike,
yeah.
this is a good day for me.
Oh yeah, you don't have people. It's a big happy day. I mean, not to say you're not happy buying a new car, but it doesn't feel the same, in
No,
my opinion. And
sure,
I'm sure you've done that, having bought so many bikes. Just,
sure,
there's something about when you buy a toy, a
sure,
recreational fun, something for fun for yourself. You can commute on it or whatever, but it's a different feeling, and you're also more connect. You want to do stuff more with a community of people, like-minded riders and types of things. So yeah, I mean it is different than a car dealership in that way, but some of those processes I just feel like they're very important for us as an industry to learn a little bit from what we can. Like I scroll down here to like the industry average of
sure.
car dealers is a lot higher than our top, you know, Indian brand dealers,
It is. And the other thing
55.
is the car guys, it was interesting. COVID hit and the auto industry already had a bunch of digital retail tools in development before COVID. And the moment
Okay.
COVID hit, all of that got supercharged. All of
Yeah.
those tools came out, a bunch of new companies were formed. And the auto industry believed back then, 2020, that a large percentage of customers would want to carry out the entire transaction online. And the
Yeah.
tools were developed to allow that to
Caravana,
happen.
Yeah.
Now, that did not happen. Today, less than one auto customer in 10 wants to carry out the whole transaction online. But the interesting thing was all of those tools were fast tracked back
Yeah.
then. And for power sports also had some tools developed that weren't in place before COVID. If you think of it, I mean, you mentioned it, estimating financing online or getting a trade-in value online. There's some good tools for the power sports industry too. But what happened was within 3 or 4 months, everybody figured out, oh no, this isn't going to be a disaster. Everybody wants to buy a car, everybody wants to buy a side by side. There are two customers for every unit we have.
Right.
So the car guys kind of forgot about the digital retail tools, didn't need them. And the power sports industry was really fat, dumb, and happy. I say with love in my heart
Right.
for several years. And if you think about the power sports industry, many of the people who were selling bikes or side by sides or quads in 21 and 2022, boy, they must have thought, hey, this is easy. It's easy to work in the power sports industry.
Yeah. Can you imagine being starting out in those times, thinking like this is how it really is? And you're like,
Sure.
yeah. I
So,
mean, yeah.
Brendan, if you scroll down to the auto average, you see that it went up from last year to this year, went from a 58 to a 62. So
Right.
if you think about it, the car guys reacted to interest rates doubling, floor traffic dropping off, times getting tough. They reacted to it by doubling down on their web response behaviors. They got better. They reacted by doing better.
But
The
we
power
got
sports
worse.
industry went the other way.
Why do you think? I
Well,
mean,
I would say, again, it's not malicious. It's not because these guys aren't bright. But if you think of staffing, it's just hard to get this part of the business, even in good times, it's hard to get it perfect. We
yeah.
see it. There are auto dealer groups that score in the 90s that just
Oh,
have this part of the process nailed. But
wow.
even among car dealers, it's rare to run into an organization that has it just perfect. So it's hard to do. It's invisible. It's not the squeaky wheel. If I'm running a dealership and all of a sudden I'm losing employees, there's turnover, or I have to cut back. I can
Yeah,
see
and
how this
two,
would
I think
would
you have in power sports dealers because they are smaller. You've got a lot of people wearing multiple hats. It may
Sure.
be, it may be a person that is doing multiple jobs, kind of monitoring the web stuff. Maybe the GM
Right.
does a little bit, but it's probably whereas on the automotive, you go to a car dealership, and they've probably got a dedicated person that's all they do.
Or they have a BDC. They're large
Yeah,
enough that they can have a dozen employees dedicated to this part.
right, right, right,
But
right.
Brendan, I'm hereby giving the power sports guys permission. All they have to do is respond once a day. Don't sweat it. Like, if you think about it, there may be a power sports dealer where last year their objective was to respond in an hour to everybody.
Oh God,
And
yeah,
and then that fell apart.
yeah.
That's okay. Once a
I think
day.
within 24 hours is legit. If I get I'm not expecting someone to call me. I obviously if you call somebody, it's different. I feel like it's a little different than than filling out a form on a website to contact you. Or to go start that sales funnel. But I also think the consumer is also aware of like, hey, I'm maybe kicking around a little bit. I don't want to talk to anybody right now, but I'm interested, so it's kind of at that very early part of the sales funnel, you know?
I think you're right. And the other thing is if you talk to six friends and say, hey, do you have any experience shopping for a vehicle online, contacting a dealer? Tell me about that. You're going to hear examples of people who have gone all the way to purchasing a product, whether it's a car or a boat or a motorcycle or whatever it is, before other dealers ever even got back to them, if the other dealers ever even got back to them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you'll just hear those anecdotes. It happens.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think the same, it's similar even to buying a house in some ways. You reach out to usually realtors are right on it, but, there's some they're like, hey, 6 months after the fact, But yeah, I mean, this is really so what you're saying is if we just kind of adopt like the best practice of getting back to your internet leads within 24 hours, we would make a huge difference.
You would. And so that is a start. What I would say is for, let's say, 40% of the power sports dealers out there, that is what they need to be focused on. Respond once a day. The moment it's possible to do that consistently, then try to do it a little faster. And what I would say is focus on within an hour as your objective. But again, you have permission from me. Doesn't have to be every customer. There
Yeah,
can be, yeah, I'm the only person on the sales floor. I have to also handle in person and web leads. There are going to be instances where I can't do it. You have a note from the doctor, that's okay. Just make
yeah,
it the objective because it's worth it. This part of the business, it's so easy to see the relationship between dealership behaviors and web lead close rates. In other
yeah.
words, like how many you sell from how many contacted you through your website.
Right. You said somewhere in here like on average dealerships that score over 80 sell 50% more vehicles.
That's it. from
So
the same quantity of web customers.
from the same
It's
quantity of customers. So you're just
it,
like doubling your sales by just being a little,
it's so worth
hey,
it.
yeah, yeah,
But like I said,
absolutely.
hey, first step is once a day. Don't sweat it if
Yeah,
that's
you
all you
can't
can
go
do.
from, if you're in the low range, try to at least get, you know, incrementally move it up,
Right.
and like we've said, many times now, I mean, your website is your front door, and it's important to, that's almost like a door swing,
It
and don't
is.
count it as a door
It
swing
is.
that you're just like, it's like you're letting somebody in to just walk around and you don't say anything to them,
Right.
if would you let somebody in your dealership to just walk around without anybody approaching them to ask them if they were if they never walked up to the counter,
Well said.
yeah, so I feel like we just have to keep that in mind as an industry and as dealers, to focus on the processes and try to get those in place. It's like doing a routine that it becomes habit after a
Sure.
while, right? So
There's another best practice that I'll be happy to pass along, and
yeah,
this is something else that has changed over 15 years. So 15 years ago, the best practice for web response was to ask the customers, how would you like to communicate? In other words, do you want me to send you an email? Do you want me to call you? There wasn't texting back then.
right.
That was the best practice. That has so gone out the window. And it's gone out the window because if I ask you that and you say, oh, I want you to email me, well, then I send you an email and you don't check your email, or it goes into spam and
Yeah,
you never see it. Or
yeah.
alternatively, we Americans have gotten really bad about answering our phone. If it's a number we don't know, we're not going to
I just
answer it.
had one. It was it says potential spam. I'm like, nope. Yeah, so that
And if somebody leaves a voicemail, we don't listen to those either. So the problem is, if you say, oh, yeah, I'm going to call you, then you don't hear it. If you say I'm going to email, there's this beautiful math that says if you reach out to a customer by both email and phone, you reach 96% of them. Because, hey, you may miss email, but you'll get them on phone. You may miss phone, you'll get them on email. And if you
yeah.
add texting in on that, you're going to reach virtually all of them. So the best practice, without question, is to reach out to the customer using as many paths as you're given, and let them decide, let them vote with their feet and decide how they get back to you. So if
I
they
like
text you back,
texting a lot,
that's
yeah.
what we're going to
But
use.
right. I think that you have to look at the multiple pronged if they're giving you the data, as long as they give you
Sure,
their phone and they may only give you one, and that
sure,
may be your only way to communicate at first.
right,
But if they give it to you, reach out to all of them,
right,
reach out, because yeah, you don't know what kind of response you're going to get. I personally think texting is highly effective, even, especially if you've engaged in, like, you just left a comment on a dealer, you went into the sales funnel, you
yeah,
contacted them to reach out for more information. If you've
sure,
left your phone number, you're aware that you have, so that text is like the voicemail, because someone calls me and I don't know who it is, just happened. I'm like, no, they'll leave a
right.
voicemail. Maybe I'll check, but I'm probably not answering.
And it's partly generational too. If you
True.
ask somebody who's 25 or 30, hey, how many texts do you get in a day? Versus if you ask somebody who's 60.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Text can definitely get lost with the younger buyers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it ends up, because they text so much, But yeah, I
Sure.
mean, I think you're right on in that, don't ask them how they want to be communicate, which, format, or which, device or platform. Just follow up on what they give you, and what, on both of them, all of it.
That's it.
So
And there's no question, if you were able to choose, and of course you're not, but if you were able to choose how you would communicate with the customer, it would be by phone. Phone is absolutely better than email or better than text, but there are plenty of customers that don't want to talk by phone.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm kind of, yeah, I'm a little bit like that in that unless I'm really like, yes, I'm buying this right now, my mind's made up or whatever. I've gone through that sales funnel far enough. But as an initial contact, I'm usually like, nah, I don't have time for that, you know?
Sure.
But everybody's different. So, again, and I do think there's a lot of dealers that they work those phones and they work them well, but there's other ways, especially with the younger generations that they want to be reached, and
Sure.
you have to take into effect there's even social media still, if their web page or Facebook page ends up going to their dealership, that's still an internet lead,
It
you
is.
know. So
Sure.
is there anything that you want to add, or is there anything like the dealers do, like on their web page that's maybe, you know, not helping them
Sure.
to
So
convert?
there's something, the saying, what you don't know doesn't hurt you. Well, so we measure tens of thousands of these internet lead effectiveness evaluations every year, or even more,
Yeah,
100,000. And we see the technology break regularly. And by that, I mean you have to have a website that talks to a email client. It for many of these or some of these manufacturers, the lead is sent off to an enterprise lead management company run by the manufacturer and then given back to the dealer.
yeah,
Everything has to work. And we see things
that's a good
break
point.
all the time. So if nobody is watching out for that, the only person who's really experiencing it is your customer
Yeah,
who goes to your website and submits an inquiry and never hears back. And the reason they never hear back is the dealer never gets the lead.
right.
So
It's
that is
never
far
gone
more
through there,
common.
yeah, it's broken
That's
the
far
chain
more common.
somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just having your phone number on there. I mean, yeah, you'll get customers that'll call you, but if they're going to go through the trouble of going onto your website and then trying to click through to a comment or to some, wanting more information and that's not going anywhere, that's a
Yeah.
problem. And I do think that that's a very good point for dealers to pay attention to make sure all their links are working,
Right.
and especially those, the contact us links and things that you're capturing that information because that's vital information that you can use, to make a sale.
You may find, as a dealer, you may find that your dealership email client is all of a sudden getting gray listed or blacklisted by Google. So everybody with a Gmail account is not getting your email, or it's all going into junk.
Right.
And
Oh,
that's
that
just
happens
this.
all the time, that junk mail.
Sure.
I'm like, oh, where did that go? Oh, I forgot I had a spam folder, you know?
Right.
So
So the point,
yeah,
I guess, is just as a dealership, make sure you're measuring it, make sure you're testing it so you know what the customers are really experiencing. Some of the smaller dealerships, there could be
like an
even
internal
problems on the
audit,
web. Sure. There could even be a
Yeah,
problem on the website where the website isn't working correctly.
right. Yeah, that's true. And I see that quite a bit as well. And just things aren't working right, or it doesn't pull up right, or there's a lot of outdated, I mean, everyone does their stuff different, but I think if you're having that be your front door, count it as a front door that so you can let people in and make it easy to go into that sales funnel.
Well
So
said.
yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Fran. This is really great stuff, and I really appreciate you joining us and all the work you do measuring this stuff. I know it takes a lot of time. I'm just looking at, when it's starting. It's like a year-long thing, pretty much for you guys. So, kudos to your team and for putting this all together for the benefit of all of us in the industry, for the dealers. And yeah, I think this is stuff that we just have to keep working on, and let's get our numbers up there for the next time. Hopefully we can see a little higher number or higher engagement next year, but we'll see. We'll see how this pans out. But I think in years past, this isn't, we're not just taking orders anymore. You have to work the process.
Sure.
So All right. Well, thank you so much, Fran. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks. You too. All right. If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us on powersportsbusiness.com.